We pick up right where we left off last week, or not last week, a couple weeks ago, with the Storm Giant, this Mage of Uk'otoa, and these Scions of Uk'otoa making their way through the jungle, basically emerging just as the Mighty Nine has come across the ruins of this temple. Initiative is immediately rolled as the session starts, and the Mighty Nine are kind of hiding in the bushes, unsure if they've been seen yet. And as always, for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to kind of go through this long combat, hitting the highlights, which we start off basically with Veth casting Hypnotic Pattern, and she is able to successfully stun, for lack of a better word, all of the enemies except for the giant, the mage, and I think just one or two of the scions. All the rest of them succumb to it. The giant, since it's not affected, continues to just kind of stampede through the jungle and run straight towards the ruins of this temple and slams down, basically sundering like a large portion of this temple and creating this deep pit in the earth where it stood. Jester basically follows that up, casting Earthquake on another large portion of the temple and just like the entire map, really, in general, causing everything to become difficult terrain and more of the temple to like kind of crumble and crash. This Earthquake spell causes Yasha and the giant to fall prone, with the latter actually falling on top of the former. While that's happening, the mage tries to cast Fly on themselves and fly down into the pit that the giant just created. But fortunately, Ford is there and he's able to cast Counterspell. So the mage is kind of annoyed at this point and just jumps down into the pit. Just free falls, basically.
Yeah.
Then combat ensues. A lot of the Mighty Nine are striking at this prone giant, including a nasty Disintegrate from Caleb. But Bo dives down after the mage, and Aveth, I think after taking a quick, couple bow strikes at the prone giant, decides to go down with her and help her out. Ford casts Fly on himself and flies down there as well. And down inside the pit, there are like these pillars and sun sigils, which they had been warned about in the journal in the episode previous to avoid those, and lots of just snake iconography. And they've noticed there's numerous holes in the wall as well that snakes ultimately begin to pour out of a bit later in this encounter. Meanwhile, back up top, though, the giant regains its composure, gets back to its feet, and slams the ground once again. This causes basically the pit to widen, more destruction to happen, and everyone inside the pit already, and including Caleb and the giant, who are still a little bit higher elevated, all fall down and fall even further than the people in the pit already were, down to this new level and a whole new map. The giant and mage fall prone on this new level, but Ford is able to be okay because he was flying. Caleb, Bo, and Veth are also all okay between Slowfall and Featherfall. It's at this point that the mage attempts to Dimension Door, but is counterspelled once again by Ford. And back up top, Jester and Kingsley actually Dimension Door ultimately down to join everyone else. And more combat ensues. All the Mighty Nine are unleashing attacks on the mage, the giant, and the scions. And Ford is demanding the return of the Cloven Crystal, but he doesn't see it. Yasha then actually gets the "how do you want to do this" on the mage and decapitates them. And at this point, the giant has been dealt with, and all the remaining scions have now jumped down this deep pit. So they're like taking massive damage, and their legs are breaking when they come down here. But all the remaining ones have gathered, and they're not attacking the Mighty Nine. Instead, they are all frantically searching. And one of the scions, we're told, on a natural 20, actually finds the Cloven Crystal and slams it down into this hole in the floor, with the other ones like encircling it, protecting it. As it does this, they all begin to laugh, and the walls of this chamber, which are intricately carved with iconography of the sea and snakes, like I said, and a cloaked serpent, like images of the calamity, and all of these runes, they all light up and then shatter and crack. And the scions continue laughing as this happens, and the Mighty Nine just kind of pick them off one by one, with like they're not even fighting back at this point. And as that all happens, Ford feels this like cold, dark sensation kind of run through him, and he knows like in his heart that Uk'otoa has been released. Then all of a sudden in this chamber, they can feel this sourceless yet omnipresent like anger that's like surrounding them. And a nearby statue with three heads, presumably of Zahir, the cloaked serpent, its eyes begin to glow. And Ford's like, let's get out of here. So he attempts to cast Arcane Gate to get the party out of here, but is prevented from doing so by Zahir himself. Zahir wants answers, and so Ford approaches the statue, and as he does, the jaw of the statue like cracks open and begins to speak. It says, "Traitorous, failure, false god, foolish pretender. It will not escape punishment." Then Zahir notices that Ford has the mark of Fukutoa due to his previous pact with him, and is like, you did this. But the party's like, no, 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 no. We were actually here to stop him from being released. And you know what? You need somebody to take care of it now that he is released. So like, we're on the same team here. And Zahir's like, well, if that's true, then one of you is going to have to make a pact with me so that I know you're telling the truth and that I can keep an eye on you. So the party's like, okay. And he's like, this pact is necessary also because you will need it to return Ukutoa to its prison. And the party briefly discusses who should take this on, but Ford ultimately steps up and is like, we're here because of me. Like, I should be the one to do this. And so Ford steps up to the statue and is like, I will make the pact. As he does, the three heads of this statue kind of like turn and face him. And he all of a sudden on his chest feels like this cold sensation and then like a hot searing pain as he gets like this emblem on his sternum. And then he hears a voice that says, choose. Do you embrace the shadow or do you climb the peak of the mountain? And Ford chooses to climb. When he does that, the heads of the statue fall off, revealing the hilt of a blade embedded within this statue. And he is told to take the fang of the Spire King. Ford marvels, and Travis really marvels at this blade because of course Matt hands him the stats, but he ultimately gives it to Kingsley as he thinks it would be better suited in his hands. Plus Ford has the Star Razor. With that done, due to Ford's connection with Ukutoa, he can feel that Ukutoa is just, like I said, out, released, and is somewhere south in the Lucidian Ocean. So what's next? They're like, all right, we need to get out of here and we need to get a boat and go deal with this thing. So they briefly debate on exactly what the plan should be, which includes Jester sending a message to the Plank King and getting threatened to never message him again or else he will cut his throat. But ultimately they're like, okay, Caleb can teleport us out of here and we'll go to Nicodranus and get a boat and boom. So they do exactly that. He teleports them. And once they arrive in Nicodranus, they can already see like this eerie black mass of clouds out on the ocean and like massive storm. And they're already hearing swirling rumors of like prophets who are seeing visions of many yellow eyes and coastal cities destroyed by water and fire. They're told the Concord Navy is already like being gathered to be sent to investigate, and boats are being mobilized to go investigate this. The party's like, okay, first things first, we need to get a ship, and then rest probably and make moves. So they go down to the port, and ultimately there's two ships for them to choose from: the Drinsala Vis and the Ever Onward. They choose the former because it means luck of the mother in Marquesian, and they think that's a good sign because of Ford's connection with the Wild Mother. So they approach the ship and its captain, Captain Adela, who they actually have met before, briefly in Campaign 2. Fill her in on everything that's going on, and with a persuasion roll of, I believe, 25, basically get her to say she's in. They can use her crew and her ship. Ford's like, okay, we just need to do some final things, but like we can head out. So Caleb, while this is happening, flies over to Yusa's tower and asks Yusa, is there anything you can do to like help us prepare for this undertaking? And Yusa gives Caleb basically a satchel of potions. He's coming back. He stops by the lavish chateau and I think picks up a charcuterie board for dinner for everyone. Gets back to the ship. They realize that they can just rest on the ship and take off immediately. So that's what they do. Before retiring for the night, though, Jester does send a quick couple of messages to her mother and to Yeza, warning them of what's to come and helping them prepare accordingly. And we get one other moment with Kingsley making his way to Bo and Yasha's room for a quick chat. He just wanted to know a little bit more about Molly and what their impressions of Molly were, because Kingsley wants to embody the balance of nature and nurture better than both Molly and Lucian did. So he wants to know where they went wrong. He wants to make his own mistakes, but he wants to be better than they were. And Bo and Yasha kind of give him some advice and tell him that just try to tread the line safer than they did, but everyone makes mistakes. Really great moment. So everyone then goes to bed, and when they wake up, they can see this storm quickly approaching. Rain's pouring down in the distance. They can see other ships and hear cannon fire. And Ford sees something long, dark, and familiar. And basically, that's where we go to break.
Yeah, great job, man. Yeah, so coming out of the break, this back half, the episode's almost 6 hours long.
Yeah.
So quite a bit's happening this episode. And in this back half of the episode, the party's basically approaching this storm where there's already, the battering of cannon fire. There's ships that either were caught in the storm or were brave enough to go into the storm to face whatever was inside of it. And like Will mentioned, as they are approaching the storm, they are seeing flashes of chaos that's happening in the darkness of the storm. One thing that does happen as they are going into the storm, everyone's kind of getting themselves ready for the combat to come. And Matt even, it's a very RPG moment of kind of like, is the party ready to move forward now?
Yeah.
One interesting thing is Gesture burns a 5th level spell slot to cast Control Weather and has a contested roll against Ukatoa, the demigod, as to who's going to control the weather. She succeeds and is able to affect it for about half an hour, whereas Jester jokes, we've beaten Ukatoa, we've won. All that to say, the party moves into the storm, and Matt reveals the final battle map for this 2-shot, and it's actually the table they're on. I think he picks something up or removes something, and you realize it's this awesome LCD glowing stormy table that the party's on. So combat's going to begin. There's a couple of things, there's so many things that are going to be happening in this combat. So I'll highlight the important stuff for the sake of time. First things first, Ukatoa is represented on the battle map as this serpent that has different body parts that are on the battle map, but they're all part of Ukatoa. So he's in the water. He also has a lair action because it's the ocean, which is that is his lair.
Right.
And there's 2 main lair actions that you're going to see in the combat. One is called Battering Winds, which basically creates tough terrain for everyone affected by it. And then the second one is the one that actually combat opens with. It is a large tidal wave. And in fact, as combat begins, this tidal wave happens. It knocks, I think, almost everyone except for Yasha. They had to do a strength saving throw. It knocks them prone, and they all take 45 points of damage. So yeah. Right off the bat, it was like, oh, and the roll was actually fairly high as well. Jester has to do a concentration check for her. In fact, everyone who had concentrations going, immediately lose it, basically.
Yeah.
And Laura Bailey's like, yeah, I'm really glad I burned that spell slot to immediately lose it. So, but Matt does tell her that, hey, you did affect the storm a little bit, and it will affect some of the lair actions. So, all that to say, you have the lair action. Ukatoa is going to be having legendary actions after each person's turn. And in terms of combat, essentially what happens is we have Caleb, who's going to fly up into the air and cast Shapeshift and turn into this large dragon,
So cool.
who is freaking amazing for the entirety of this combat. He'll be doing that. Bo, the freaking amazing person that she is going to launch off the ship onto the head of Ukatoa and is going to spend a few rounds just beating and smattering on Ukatoa's head. Even at one point taking a full blast from Caleb the dragon, who's breathing this spectral blast down on Ukatoa. Ford is going to cast Fly and is going to be casting spells like Cone of Cold to try to hit multiple parts of Uk'otoa, and then consequently is also going to eventually freeze the ocean to create tough terrain for Uk'otoa to not be able to move freely through. Veth is going to be this rogue sniper on the ship. And in fact, Veth is probably the first one who scores a natural 20 in this combat, where Matt actually asks them whenever they're attacking, are you attacking the eye or are you attacking the body of Uk'otoa? The trade-off here, which Matt reveals around round 2, maybe round 3, is when the body of Uk'otoa is attacked, which has a lower armor class, it builds up fury, this resource that Uk'otoa has, and when he has too much fury, he unleashes these lightning bolt attacks across the battlefield, which he does, I think, again, around 2 or 3. But if you attack the eye of Uk'otoa, it will reduce fury, but it's a much harder attack to hit because it has a higher armor class. But Veth targets the eye, gets a natural 20, and with his her Voltaxic Bolt opens up combat in the first round with like this. I think actually Veth was towards the end of the round, but hits for around 80 points of damage, which is just crazy.
Yeah.
Bo's going to get totally rocked, literally being on top of Uk'otoa's head. But one thing that's really cool is that Gesture is going to cast Duplicity and summon 4 copies of herself that kind of spread around the arena. And for those of you guys who watched Campaign 3, Matt didn't have copies of Gesture, so we actually pulled out copies of Otahan Thule from the 3rd campaign to use as the duplicates.
Otahan is Jester, confirmed.
Yeah. So there's other cool flavor things that happen. Ford uses Hexblade's Curse because he's a warlock, and Uk'otoa is like, oh, you're going to use your power against me, and actually begins ending each round basically trying to cast Charm Person on Ford to basically force him to be his servant once again. He fails in round 2. In round 3, Uk'otoa is successful and actually causes Ford to go over to Jester. And there's kind of this funny moment where Jester's like playing dumb, is like, oh, hi, Ford. Or Laura Bailey's playing dumb. Like, hey, Ford, what's up? And then Ford just whoosh, slashes through her. Not fatal damage, but definitely like hits her fairly hard. All this to say, the party's looking pretty rough, and Uk'otoa was seemingly still pretty resilient until Gesture, who's at the very bottom of the round, using her duplicates, she casts Mass Heal, which heals 700 points of damage. Pretty much brings everyone to full life except for like herself and maybe one other. In the party, I never watched Campaign 2, but people were joking like, you did more healing than you did the entirety of Campaign 2. And I think Liam was like, we stan our blue-horned queen. So brings everyone back up to full life. And it's at this moment that it's like, Uk'otoa is screwed. Like, they've already been like ripping this dude to shreds, and they've just gotten healed back to full life. There are some other things that do happen though. Bo gets attacked by Uk'otoa and then is swallowed by Uk'otoa. And on her next turn, she uses, and I did know the item, Cape of the Mounteback.
Yeah.
It's an item she has that gives her a single cast of Dimension Door. So she Dimension Doors out of the stomach of Uk'otoa and onto the ship, which is pretty cool. Caleb is going to fly down and pretty much grab Uk'otoa by the head and breathe this big cone, another big spectral blast into him, which was pretty awesome. And then Yasha is basically wants to grab the tail of Uk'otoa to prevent him from escaping, and also ends up recklessly attacking Uk'otoa as well. And it actually gets her the, how do you want to do this? And you get this really cool moment where everyone kind of pitches in for like this kind of team, how do you want to do this moment? There's like an arcane gate that gets opened up that Veth's like swinging through to attack with, and all this to say, Ford gets this awesome like final moment where Caleb turns into like a dragon turtle, and with the final blow, Uk'otoa begins to sink to the bottom of the ocean, and Caleb helps Ford basically swim down after Uk'otoa, and then resting at the base of the ocean, Uk'otoa is slowly healing, slowly returning and regenerating to he's a demigod, and so is coming back to life, so to speak. And Ford reaches out and basically calls on Zahir, and basically says, I curse him, I condemn him back to the depths. And as this happens, the his tattooed sigil signifying the pact that he has with Zahir begins to burn, and Uk'otoa's body dissipates, leaving behind 3 floating cloven crystals, which Matt implies the cycle has begun again. So victorious, Ford swims out of the water back onto the boat, and he still senses Zahir's presence, and then these vines and the sun from the clouds that's parting shines down on him, and that mark, that tattoo, dissipates and fades away, seemingly implying that the Wild Mother has removed the curse of Zahir, that pact with Zahir. That was my take on it. We can talk about it in the recap. All that to say, we get a nice little epilogue from the characters. Ford mentions that of the 3 cloven crystals, 1 goes to Vokodo's lair on Rumblecusp, 1 he gives to the Cobalt Soul to protect it, and the 3rd one he decides not to keep himself, but he keeps the location hidden for no one to know. Bo puts the cloven crystal deep into the vault of the Cobalt Soul. I kind of envision it as like a very Indiana Jones-esque, deep into the archives.
Yeah.
Gets a foot rub from Yasha, and they continue to live their beautiful life. Yasha keeps learning from their neighbor, Martina Stewart. Vets Camp is a wild success, even though he does mention 1 student does die. But fortunately, they're able to bring the student back to life. Kingsley, who had cut a piece of hide off Uk'otoa, fashions it into something nice, and continues to meet with Caduceus, and continues to, it's almost like sort of like exploring like who he was and finding who he is at this point. Kingsley also continues to work at Stone's Throw Shipping until eventually, which that venture does happen, I guess, and eventually steals a ship, and the Mighty Nine gets letters informing them that they're no longer banished from Dark Toe, courtesy of the new Plank King Kingsley. No idea what any of that means, but other than that, Bo and Yasha talk about adopting kids, rebranding the Orphan Maker as the Orphan Taker. And also Caleb does go back to Rexentrum and eventually does take a job at the Soltris Academy, and also continues to give workshops at Vets Camp. So as the show is ending, back at Caleb's place, there's a knock on a door, and it's Essek, who basically is like, hey, I've heard you had a crazy story to talk about. They share a short kiss. He enters the small abode, and that is where the Mighty Nine Reunion Part 2 comes to an end.
Heard you had a crazy story to tell. Great job, man. Sorry, that was a little inside joke.
It's never easy to recap 6 hours of tabletop RPG.
No, we do our best.
Yeah. So, having said that, I think we're gonna bring Ken in from the green room, and we may be in different shirts when you see it.
Maybe.
But don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And so we'll see you guys shortly. We're going to be talking about what we thought about the episode. We don't know what you thought about the episode. So if you're watching just the recap, click the link in the description to see our full breakdown, and we'll be with you guys shortly.
Yep. See you guys in just a second.